action. Everybody's gonna know how we're dividing fractions. Keep change, flip, yeah, that's the action. Everybody's gonna know how we're dividing fractions. Keep change.
Hello and welcome to the Kearney Math Show. Thank you all for tuning in today. On today's episode of the Kearney Math Show, we are going to be featuring multiplying and dividing fractions. So before we get started, take a moment to escriba tu nombre, write your name on your paper, and this is entry number 9. So in today's episode of the Kearney Math Show, we're talking about multiplying and dividing fractions. So let's take a minute to read our learning goal. By the end of today, we want you to be able to explain to someone else how to multiply and divide fractions. So you're probably thinking, well, gosh, I feel like we've already done this. We did this probably in 5th grade and 6th grade. So the big difference between 6th grade and 7th grade is now we're multiplying and dividing positive and negative fractions. Okay, so before we get started, I want to take a moment to go over some key vocabulary words that you're going to need in order to be successful. So let's look at the first vocabulary word, which is fraction. So our question is, what words do I need to know in order to do this? So the first one is a fraction. And a fraction is simply a part of a whole. So when you have a fraction of something, you have a part of the whole amount. You just have a fraction of it, okay? And then when you look at a fraction, there are two key pieces that go into a fraction, a numerator and a denominator. So we have, and I'm going to actually put these two together. We have the numerator, which is the top number of a fraction. And the denominator is the bottom number in a fraction, okay? So let's talk about what each of those pieces of the fraction represent. The top number, the numerator, is actually the part. So if we look at this, we have the part, and we're comparing the part, which is the numerator, to the denominator, and the denominator represents the whole. So a fraction is part of a whole, and when you set it up as a fraction, the numerator is the part, the denominator is the whole. And then another key vocabulary word that you're going to need to know for today is reciprocal. So right here, reciprocal. So take a minute. Does anyone remember what reciprocal means? The reciprocal is the inverse of a number. So if we were to take a number and we were to flip it, okay? So the inverse of a number. For example, 1/8, the reciprocal of 1/8, if I were to flip that over, would be 8/1. Okay, do one more. The reciprocal of 3 would be 1/3. Okay, so reciprocal is when you flip the number, the inverse of a number. Okay, and you will need to know the reciprocal when we are dividing fractions. So now that we've talked about the vocabulary, just to recap, fraction is part of a whole. The numerator in a fraction is the part, the denominator is the whole, and then a reciprocal is the inverse. Okay, so now let's actually get to the steps of how to multiply and divide fractions. So if I were to come down, my next section is how do I multiply and divide fractions, okay? So let's first talk about multiplying fractions. Multiplying fractions, nothing has changed, okay? We're still, in order to multiply fractions, you're still going to multiply straight across, okay? You're going to multiply the numerator and then multiply the denominator. So you're multiplying straight across. The only difference is now we have positive and negative numbers. So how in the world do we multiply and divide positive and negative numbers? How do we know if the sign's positive or negative? Dun, da, da, da. Have no fear. Integer man is here. So integer man works for multiplying and dividing fractions as well. Okay? So for example, if we come down here to this problem, negative 2/3 times 4/5. Just like we said up at the top, we're going to multiply straight across. And then we just simply can use integer man to help us decide if the answer is positive or negative. So if we multiply straight across, we're going to do 2 times 4, which is 8, and 3 times 5, which is 15. And then if we look at integer man, a negative times a positive is a negative. Okay, so that's multiplying fractions. Okay, let's talk about what you would do for dividing fractions. So step 2, or section 2, to divide fractions, you are going to change it to a multiplication problem, and you're going to multiply the first fraction by the reciprocal, there's that word we talked about, reciprocal of the second fraction. So when we divide fractions, just like the video said, we're going to keep, change, flip. Yeah, that's the action. Now everybody knows how we're dividing fractions. So we're going to keep, change, flip. Okay? And then we just want to take a moment to look and say that if the number's in a mixed number form, that's the first thing you want to do is you want to change all mixed numbers to improper fractions. Okay, and that's actually, guys, we should have put that at the top. That's your very first step. You want to always look, and if you see any mixed numbers, change them to improper fractions before you multiply or divide. Okay, that's the first thing you should check for. And then the last thing is we're simply going to simplify if possible. Okay, so let's come down here to this dividing fractions. Okay, so we have negative 5/6 divided by negative 2/3. So we have negative 5/6 divided by negative 2/3. Okay, so if we go back up there, since we're dividing, it said to divide fractions, we're going to multiply the first fraction by the reciprocal of the second fraction. So we're going to keep, change, flip. So we're going to keep the first number. We're just going to bring that down. And we're going to change the division sign to multiplication. And so we're going to keep, and then we're going to change, and then we're going to flip the second number. So flip it to its reciprocal. So we're going to keep, change, flip. Okay, and now we have a simple multiplication problem. Okay, so we're going to multiply straight across. So we multiply the numerator straight across. 5 times 3 is 15. 6 times 2 is 12. And then, how do we know if our answer is positive or negative? Since we're multiplying, dun da da da, have no fear, integer man is here. So we have a negative times a negative, and a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay? And then the last and final step is we want to look to see if we can simplify. Can we simplify 15 over 12? Yes, we can simplify that. How many times? What can you divide both 15 and 12 by? We can divide them both by 3. So 15 divided by 3 is 5. 12 divided by 3 is 4. And then what do you see is wrong with that fraction? We have 5 over 4. What kind of fraction is that? It's an improper fraction, so we can change it to a mixed number. So how many times does 4 go into 5? Goes in there one time, and then what do you have left over? You have 1 over 4. So my final answer is 1 and 1/4. Okay? So just to recap, the very first thing you want to do when you're doing these problems is check to see if it is a mixed number. If it is, change it to an improper fraction. And then if it's a simple multiplication problem, just multiply straight across. If it's a division problem, we're going to keep, change, flip. And then you're going to multiply straight across, and you always want to see if you can simplify. And then the last and super important rule is that if we are multiplying and dividing positive and negative fractions, we can simply call on integer man, and he will help us determine our signs. Okay, so write down any questions you have, and we will be happy to answer them when you come to our station, and we will do more practice together. All right, good job, guys. Make me proud. Peace out, rainbow trout. Love you, mean it.